How a small upstart firm killed these Lionel boxcars on this episode of Toy Train Tips and Tricks. The year was 1946. Production of toy trains by Lionel and other manufacturers had been suspended from 1942 to early 1945 to support the American war efforts in World War II. When the war finally ended in September of 1945, Lionel was able to resume production, but with so little time before the all-important Christmas season, 1945's catalog mainly included carryover pre-war equipment with new electromagnetic knuckle couplers installed. But now, in 1946, Lionel had the opportunity to roll out the new products that their designers had dreamed up during the wartime embargo. Among these new items were the classic 221 steam locomotive, the 2465 double dome tank car, the 2419 work caboose, as well as this, the 2454 boxcar. These 9¼ inch boxcars utilized new injection molding techniques learned during the war to produce an all-plastic shell on a sheet metal frame. Doors were originally die-cast, as Lionel used up surplus pre-war parts. They were later switched to plastic as well. These cars were very nicely detailed and were included in the upper end O and O27 sets. In 1948, these boxcars were joined by their smaller cousins in the form of the X1004 8½ inch Scout boxcars, with an all-plastic single-piece shell and non-operating doors. The X2454 cars maintained their position at the top of Lionel's boxcar line, along with similarly sized number 3462 milk cars and operating stock cars. In 1949, Lionel equipped the 2454 series cars with new magnetic couplers rather than the electromagnetic that had the built-in solenoid, and in the process changed the numbers to the 6454 series. By the way, the catalog number 6454 is located here, not here. This is the number over here. Also, ignore the brown trucks on this one. A previous owner painted those to match the body. Interesting touch, but that's not original. New road names for these cars included New York Central, Santa Fe, Southern Pacific, Erie, and Pennsylvania. The similarly sized X3464 operating boxcars also joined the line in 1949. And again, the production number is here, not here. And all in all, these 9¼ inch boxcars remained the kings of Lionel's boxcar line with very few changes through 1952. The 6454 cars are great-looking O27 cars. They look good behind Lionel's smaller post-war semi-scale and undersized steamers like the Turbine, like the 221, like the 1666. However, compared to the new scale size Lionel diesels that were coming out, the F3s, the NW2s, and then later the Trainmasters, these boxcars looked ridiculously small, and the Scout cars even more ridiculous. So in 1952, Auburn Model Trains, a small Indiana firm, noticed this gap in the Lionel line and introduced a line of scale-sized 40-foot boxcar models that featured realistic paint schemes and Lionel-compatible lift-o-matic couplers. These cars looked far more realistic behind the F3s, the NW2s, and the other scale-sized diesels than did these undersized 6454s. And sales of Auburn's products soared. This was not the first time that Auburn's products had caught Lionel napping. In 1949, the firm had introduced a line of semi-scale extruded aluminum models of modern streamlined passenger cars in a number of colorful road names long before Lionel produced similar cars of their own. But Lionel was not going to get burned twice, and in 1953, they introduced their new 6464 series of boxcars. The tooling that this is based on, this is actually a 1970s MPC car, but it's based on the 6464 tooling. And these 6464s were larger than the 6454s and looked close enough to scale to not look ridiculous behind Lionel's larger locomotives. And you can see the difference in height and length between the Lionel car and the Auburn scale size car. The Auburn car is wider, taller, and slightly longer as well. But the 6464s are, again, close enough to scale to look okay behind the F3s, but also at the same time, they're smaller than scale, so they don't look huge behind Lionel's semi-scale and undersized steamers. And so, after only a 7-year production run, the 2454 and 6454 boxcar line was finished. A sad end for a nicely detailed O27 size car. Meanwhile, the smaller and cheaper Scout cars, when fitted with more traditional trucks, have been reproduced over and over again up into the 2000s whenever a inexpensive starter set boxcar has been required. And on the other end of the spectrum, the 6464 and its descendants continue to be the de facto standard traditional size Lionel boxcar even today. As for Auburn models, over-optimistic expansion led them into financial difficulties, and the line was purchased by Koosan Model Trains, which continued production of these cars and other Auburn products. However, in the 1960s, financial difficulties took over Koosan as well, and they liquidated the dies, and these dies were passed down through several manufacturers: Chris Model Trains, Williams, and today these cars are the foundation of the Menards boxcar line, based on this original tooling from Auburn from the 1950s. And so we see how a small Indiana upstart firm forced Lionel to abandon a line of boxcars, a line of neat boxcars. If you have the opportunity to pick up some of these, I suggest you do so, especially if you're an O27 operator. Again, these look really good behind Lionel's smaller sized FAs, turbines, 221, 1666, 2037s, any of the undersized steam locomotives or diesels. And despite the fact that there was a short production run, they made lots and lots of these during that time, and so they are relatively easy to find today and can generally, unless they are in mint condition, can generally be found for less than $10 for the standard size cars, or for under $20 for most of the operating boxcars. So check these out and add these to your roster. And again, here is how sometimes Lionel got caught napping by smaller firms, and it forced them to change their product lines. So I hope you enjoyed the video as much as I enjoyed making it. If so, please like it, share, subscribe, tell your friends, and tell your neighbors. Until next time, keep those trains running, and we'll catch you again on Toy Train Tips and Tricks.